Now, our topic is the ancients versus the moderns. Dryden's contribution. From Dryden's An Essay on Dramatic Poesy. In this essay, we have seen that there are claims for the superiority of the ancients and the moderns. In the age of Dryden, they raised a hot debate on the comparative merits and demerits of the ancients and the moderns. Swift has treated this debate satirically in his well known work, The Battle of the Book. In his essay of dramatic poesy, Dryden has argued moderately and tolerantly on behalf of the moderns, though the mouth of Eugenius, one of the four debaters in the essay. The case for the ancients is presented by Critias. In the controversy, Dryden takes no extreme position, follows the golden mean, and is sensible enough to give the ancients their due. Through this dispassionable, balanced enough to give the ancients their due. He removes the cobwebs which had confused the issues and makes us see clearly the achievements of the ancients and the independentness of the moderns to them, as well as the significant advances which have been made in the modern times. Thus, he sets the controversy at rest and makes us see the comparative merits and demerits of each in a clearer light. Now, some introductory remarks. The essay on dramatic poetry opens with a few introductory remarks regarding the bad verses that are composed to celebrate national events and national figures. The conversation soon turns on the comparative merits and demerits of the ancient and modern poetry. It is then agreed among the four characters, Critias, Lycidius, Eugenius, and Neander, that their discussion should be confined to dramatic poetry. As a preliminary to the more serious discussion to follow, Lycidius defines a play as the lively and just image of human nature representing its passions and humors and the changes of fortune to which it is subject, for the delight and instruction of mankind. All the four speakers agree to this definition. Now, we see that what are the claims for the superiority of the ancients. Critias then takes up the case of the ancients and speaks in their defense. The superiority of the ancients is established by the very fact that the moderns simply imitate them and build on the foundations laid by them. The ancients are the acknowledged models of the moderns. Secondly, it should be remembered that every age has its own genius, its own inclination for some particular branch of knowledge. Thus, in the modern age, their genius is for the study of natural sciences, as medicine, anatomy, astronomy, and in these studies they far surpass the medieval schoolmen and have made more progress than could be made during all the centuries from Aristotle to their own time. Similarly, the ancients had a special genius for drama, and in this particular branch of poetry, they could reach perfection. Just as they excel the medieval philosophers in science, so also the ancients excel them in drama. Third point, in ancient Greece and Rome, poetry was more honored than any other branch of knowledge. Poets were encouraged to excel in this field through regards and honors shown to them in public. There were frequent competitions, judges were appointed, and the dramatists were rewarded according to merit. There are historical records to show how Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, etc. were rewarded and honored in this way. Such competitions and rivalry encouraged dramatic production for sage critics. Emulation is the spur of wit and sometimes envy, sometimes admiration. Quickens our endeavors, but in modern times there is no such spirit of healthy rivalry and competition. Poets are not suitably honored and rewarded. Poets are guided more by malice than by the spirit of virtuous emulation. They criticize and denounce others instead of themselves trying to do better. In other words, there is much destructive criticism. As poets are not suitably rewarded and honored, they do not take pains and put in their best efforts. That is why there are so few good poets but so many harsh judges. The ancient drama is superior because the ancients wisely observed nature and faithfully represented her in their works. The moderns do not observe and study nature carefully, and so they distort and disfigure her in their plays. There is no faithful representation of nature in their works. The rules of dramatic composition, which the moderns now follow, have come down to them from the ancients. They have devised no new rules nor in any way added to or modified any of their rules. Critias makes special mentions of the unities of time, place, and action, which he says ought to be observed in every regular play. The ancients followed these rules, and the effect is satisfying and pleasing. But there are few modern plays in which these are observed. The unity of time is violated, and often the action of a play covers whole ages. Instead of one action, there are a number of actions, and one spot of ground, that is the stage, is supposed to represent many countries. The modern plays are therefore unnatural, they cannot be called a just and a true representation of nature. The ancients could organize their plays well, and from this it follows that they must have also written well. We are unable to appreciate the wit and beauty of their language only because many of their customs, stories, etc., are not known to us. There is much that is highly proper and elegant in their language, but we fail to appreciate it because their language is dead and remains only in books. The greatest man of the last days, Ben Jonson, had great admiration for the ancients. He imitated them and plagiarized heavily from them. He considered them superior to the moderns in all things. Since Eugenides prefers him to all other poets, his examples should be sufficient to convince him of the superiority and excellence of the ancients. Both the best and the worst of the modern poets teaches one to admire the ancients. Now, case for the moderns. We will see that what are the claims for the moderns made by the speakers. Eugenius then replies to Critias and speaks in favor of the moderns. In the very beginning, he acknowledges that the moderns have learned much from the ancients. The moderns are indebted to them for rules of dramatic composition and must be grateful to them for it. But by their own labor, they have added to what they have gained from them, with the result that they now excel them in many ways. The moderns have not blindly imitated the ancients. Had they done so, they would have lost their old perfections and would not have achieved any new excellencies. Along with observing the rules of the ancients, the moderns also observe and faithfully follow nature. In this way, to the knowledge and experience gained from the study of the ancients, they add new qualities and beauties and so excel them. Just as in natural sciences, they excel the previous ages because of their greater study and painstaking, so also in poetry, because of the greater pains they take, they are nearer to perfection than the ancients. Their greater labor makes them superior in science as well as in poetry. Further, the point that the ancients imitate nature more perfectly than the moderns has not been established. Critias must prove this point. On his part, Eugenius proceeds to bring out some defects of the ancients and some excellencies of the moderns. In the first place, the ancients did not know the division of a play into acts. It was the entrance and singing of the chorus which was supposed to divide a play into parts, and in some of their plays, the chorus sang more than 5 times. Hence, the number of acts in Greek plays is uncertain. The moderns have perfected this division and divided their plays not only into acts but also into scenes. The Greeks cannot lay and claim to this perfection, for their plays were merely divided in an uncertain manner by the entrance. The Spaniards and the Italians have excellent plays to their credit, and they divide them into 3 acts and not 5. The faults of the Greeks was not that they did not divide their plays into 5 acts. Their real fault was that they did not confine themselves to any fixed number. They wrote without any definite plan, and when they could write a good play, their success was more a matter of chance and good fortune than of ability. As far as the plot or fable of the ancients is concerned, it lacks originality. The plots of their tragedies are based usually upon some well known story which had already been woven threadbare by numerous poets. Therefore, their tragedy lack the charm of novelty according to the definition, and their tragedies could not have performed this important function. The plots of their comedies also lack originality. Certain stock devices and situations are endlessly repeated. Similarly, their characters also are stock characters such as an old father, a corrupt son, an intriguing servant, a boastful soldier at the center of the story. There is always a poor, honest girl, as mute and dumb as any well bred Elizabethan maiden. In their characterization, they no doubt imitate nature, but their imitation is narrow and partial, as if they imitated only some part and not the whole body. The ancients are inferior to the moderns in all these respects. Even their observation of three unities of time, place, and action is not perfect. Terence was one of the most regular of the ancient dramatists, but even he does not faithfully observe the unities of time. One of his well known plays takes 2 days, and the division of time among the various acts is not proportionate. Euripides, another great dramatist, no doubt confines his action to 1 day, but then he commits many absurdities. Examples of such absurdities are to be found in most of their plays, no doubt. They have maintained better than the moderns the continuity of their scenes, but this is so only because they seldom have more than one or two scenes in each act. As their plots are narrow and their characters few, even their whole acts are often shorter than individual scenes in the well wrote modern plays. Further, in their plays, there is too much of narration at the cost of action. Instead of providing the necessary information to the ancient through dialogues, they do not uh, do so through long narrations. The result is their plays become monotonous and tiresome. For example, Terence in his Eunuch and Adelphi is guilty of this sin. The ancients commit errors in the laying and managing of their plots. They deviate from their own rules and so misrepresent nature. Their plays do not perform one of the functions of drama, that of giving delight. They do not perform the other function also, that of giving instruction. There is no poetic justice in their plays. Instead of rewarding virtue and punishing vice, they show prosperous wickedness and unhappy virtue. They are guilty of every possible impropriety and indecorum. Every impropriety of the moderns can easily be justified by the authority of the ancients. This is all the more surprising if we keep in mind that in the past comedies and tragedies were written by separate individuals and not by the same person as at present. They worked in a narrow field and so could easily have achieved perfection in it. Their failure, therefore, is a proof of their inferiority to the moderns. Eugenius agreed with Crates that they are not competent to judge their language since it is dead, and many of their stories, customs, habits, etc., have been lost to them. However, they have certain glaring faults which cannot be denied. They are often too bold in their metaphors and in their coinages as far as possible. Only such words should be used as are in common use, and new words should be coined only when absolutely necessary. Horace himself has recommended this rule, but the ancients violate it frequently. This makes their language as pedantic and difficult to follow as that of Cleveland and the contemporary satirist, whom they condemn for these very reasons. True wit consists of deep thoughts in common language, and a thing well said will be wit in all languages. Their themes are equally defective. The proper end of tragedy is to arouse admiration and concernment, pity. But their themes are lust, cruelty, murder, and bloodshed, which instead of arousing admiration or pity, arouse horror. The horror of such themes can be softened a little by the introduction of love scenes, but in the treatment of this passion, they are much inferior to such moderns as Shakespeare and Fletcher. in their comedies. No doubt, they introduce a few love scenes, but their lovers talk very little. No doubt, when the heart is too full, the words are few. But there are a thousand other occasions when the lovers should speak out and reveal the working of their minds and hearts to the audience. To depict the movement of the soul is the true work of a poet, but the ancients failed to perform it. Now we will conclude our point and see Dryden's contribution to this controversy. Eugenius wanted to proceed with the discussion, but Crates cut him short. He could not agree with him in the view that the moderns were more perfect, but he considered that the moderns have altered the mode of writing, ideals and values have changed, and this accounts for much of the difference between the ancients and the moderns. For example, Virgil and Homer represent their heroes as men who liked to eat and drink well, and who often boasted of their own exploits, while the moderns represent them as moderate and modest in their ways and habits. It is not a question of good or bad, but of a change in cultural values. Similarly, the ancients were more heartily in their lovemaking, but the moderns are more talkative. This account for the difference in their love scenes. Had they written in the modern age, they might have altered their way of writing in keeping with modern values. Therefore, they should not rashly decide against the ancients. Rather, they should give them that honor which they themselves expect to be paid to them in times to come. Crichton's sane and balanced summing up of controversy expressed Darden's own moderate attitude.